Hi Ezra, how are you?
Hi Siddharth, I'm all well. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, and yourself. And I look forward to knowing more about you today. So, my first question to you is please tell me about your journey to regarding the constitutional advocacy at FW de Klerk Foundation, the South African Institute of International Affairs, and Youth Policy Committee member.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Siddharth. Firstly, can I just take a quick second to greet the viewers and thank you for joining in to what I believe will be a fantastic chat. Siddharth, if I can just start by answering that question by going back to just who Ezra is, right? So I come from a very tight-knit family, my parents and five siblings, including myself. And growing up, we grew up seeing quite a lot of the suffering that is in like that is around the country. Now,
Mm.
my parents are my dad's a pastor, and so my parents do a lot of
Oh.
missionary work from the time I was young to
Mhm.
today. They're still actively engaging in community. So you can imagine with the nature of their work, we were really exposed to so many different communities in South Africa, and not the elegant communities, but in communities that really experienced suffering, really experienced like severe forms of injustices and inequality, engaging with these different people. Now, growing up, I always knew that I had a duty to help people like this. Plus,
Hmm.
with my faith, we know we taught about love, we taught about compassion for others. And so I had a sense of duty growing up that these are people that I need to help. This is my country. And, growing up, my parents always taught us to be proud of who we are, to be proud South Africans. And so growing up, I knew I had to do something. And so I went on to high school, I went on to university. And in university, that's where I decided. I already knew from high school, but university is where I decided that I want to go into politics. So I did my undergrad in politics and international relations. I went to do my honors in international relations, and now I'm doing my master's too in international relations. And this is where my journey in politics began. I went on to the first year of varsity. I joined the South African Institute of International Affairs. Before I was like, I want to be a diplomat. You're persuaded by the fancy life that a diplomat lives, and so I wanted to
Okay.
be a diplomat. However, as time went on, things changed, and as time went on, you see the country is not really progressing economically.
Hmm.
And there is a reason why we're the most unequal society in the world. And
Hmm.
so I knew I had to do something about this. Luckily, when I was starting my honors last year, I was able to join the FW de Klerk Foundation. Now, in the foundation, I was exposed so much to constitutional advocacy, and I was able to advocate for and I'm still able to advocate for people that are suffering around the country. However, it's something that had to be built on. I thought constitutional advocacy was something for the law, people that studied the law, and that was my hesitation in the beginning. And to see what I studied being able to be used in what I was doing, I was actually very impressed and very happy. And I went on to cementing this with things that I've done in the past. So, Siddharth, you asked about my work with the South African Institute of International Affairs. So, when I joined Varsity, I was with them as a national story lead. So, they were compiling the South African Youth Climate Action Plan. Climate change has become a very big issue in
Hmm.
the world, and South Africa is beginning to take a strong stance, to advocate against climate change. And so we as the youth were part of this mission to advocating against climate change. Now I co-authored the South African Youth Climate Action Plan, which the government took to COPs, which they take to various COPs. Now, it was a very beautiful experience. That was my first time where I've ever been in a position as a youth leader to highlight the stories of people that were suffering as a result of climate change. And so from that, I thought, hey, now I can move on to addressing so many different issues. Hence, as I mentioned with the FW de Klerk Foundation, advocating for people's rights, that every single South African deserves to live the life envisioned for them by the Constitution. Siddharth, I find it very sad that sometimes we go to high schools to speak to
Mm,
students and we ask the very basic question, who knows what the Constitution is? There's so
mm,
many young people that don't know what the Constitution is, and I don't blame them. But I find it that it's my responsibility to go and speak to them and educate them on the Constitution, because believe me, the Constitution has a very beautiful life that it envisions for all our citizens. And once each and every single citizen can know what that life is, they'll be able to hold their leaders accountable. So yeah, that was my very basic intro to my journey, my political journey. I always say that my political journey isn't a political journey in the sense that I've joined a political party. No, it's been a journey of advocacy. I said, you know what, I'm interested in politics, but I believe
mm.
a huge benefit to my journey would be to educate people on the Constitution, to be able to defend the oppressed, to support justice for each and every single person in South Africa. So yeah, it's a very irregular political journey, but it's one that I've really seen myself grow into. And by this journey, I've seen so many lives already beginning to be affected positively by the work that I'm doing. And so I desire to continue with this journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you missed out on the Youth Policy Committee member.
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. So
That's
the
okay.
Youth Policy Committee was something I ran simultaneously with my role as a national lead. So the Youth
Mm-hmm.
Policy Committee is a committee established by the South African Institute on International Affairs, to basically address policy, to bring youth voices into policy. And so we meet with different stakeholders, we meet with government officials, business people, to address a vast variety of issues that youth are experiencing. And basically, we are the voices. We sit at the table with these decision makers, with policy makers, with business people, and we are the voices that advocate for the youth. We bring and we really work to push for results, not just for advocating, but to push for results. And where results can't be given, we make our voice known. We show our disgruntlement. Because the youth, I believe, can need to be taken seriously. We're the future of the country, and so we can't continue to be sidelined or quieted. No, we have to be heard. And yeah, so that's the work with the Youth Policy Committee, and it really also fed into the work I would later currently do as in constitutional advocacy.
Who are the people that you look up to in the spaces that you're in?
Yeah. So as a South African, of course, I look up to figures like Nelson Mandela and have
Mm-hmm.
remarkable respect for such figures. However, I think a political figure that I really look up to, not just because of what they did, but because of the life they lived, is the recently deceased Jimmy Carter. Now, President
Oh,
Jimmy Carter lived a very, very, very interesting life, a life where he lived with principle. He adhered, he walked a life in his faith, and he went on to doing remarkable things. He went on to being a president, but Siddharth, I don't just look at his presidency. I particularly respect the life he chose, the things he did after his presidency, with the
okay.
Carter Center, going on to help people all over the world. I see this and I respect him for a principle driven life. And it's something that I've decided to implement in my own life with my journey. Of course, Ezra doesn't want to live the life President Carter lived, but I want to live a life that is principally driven with principles. And I believe by living this sort of life, we really contribute to the health of our society. We really contribute to helping people rather than being a cause of division within our society. And so that's another reason why I haven't decided, to join a party yet, is because of that. I want to use my principles to help people.
Mm.
At the end of the day, to me, the Constitution is the Constitution, and that's what must be protected. That's what must be defended, and that's what we need to aspire for the people of South Africa. So yeah, that's just like one example of a political figure that I really look up to. Yeah.
What have been your highlights thus far?
Yeah. So with the highlights, it's basically everything that I've mentioned regarding my rapid rise in this political, you know, this political space. It's like, as I said, right from the beginning of university straight up to now, thank God I've managed to be in the spaces that I've been in. However, I need to add something else to that. Now, in 2022, I went on an exchange program to France, and it was
Wow.
very different for me. It was a very unique experience. Now,
Mm.
as someone who came from a small farming community to all of a sudden now traveling abroad alone, it was very eye-opening. And I think because of this, it really exposed me to different things in societies. Now, I went to France to learn about, French history, but not only French history, but to understand your energy, your nuclear energy, that sort of thing, and how cities are developed around the world. So it was a very unique form of study, which I really wanted to go and learn so I could see in my future studies how this could be applied to South Africa. And so I think this was a very interesting moment. The connections I made, the people I made, being exposed to the international scene gave me sort of a new understanding about life. It's you need to leave your comfort zone. In this case, I'll use South Africa as my comfort zone and go out to see other ways of life, to see how other people are living, how other people think, and to come back and to analyze what change could we bring to South Africa? Not a copy and paste model, but what, in the context that South Africa is in now, what change could we bring to the country? And so this was kind of a high moment for me, because right after this moment is where many other things politically started to fall in place for me. And this is what I learned is currently the main driving force of my political journey. So I think that was one particularly amazing high moment for me.
Okay, so what have been the lowlights, if any?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, Siddharth, because I have experienced low moments, but I think, which I will explain, the low moments contributed to some high moments. I think I'll say a particularly interesting low moment for me was when I started my work, with constitutional advocacy, and I was developing articles. I remember I started this work around the election period last year, and I was highlighting different manifestos and how they weighed against the constitution. So whether they were compliant with the constitution of South Africa or whether there were elements of the manifestos that were not compliant with the constitution of South Africa. And we published it. I issued them through the foundation, the FW de Klerk Foundation. But I think what was a bit of a low moment for me was when you see that, hey, not everyone thinks the way you think. And with the articles I published, there was so much backlash in some of them. Like, you will find people disagree and everything. And particularly at that point, I did some self-introspection. I'm like, Ezra, what are we doing wrong? The Constitution says this, but why is there some sort of like disagreement surrounding my work? And then it hit me that an important element of a democracy is to have these sort of conversations, is to have disagreements. Now, our disagreements have to be based on what is best for the South African people. You know, Voltaire said something very interesting. He said, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And so when I think about these sorts of things, those low moments were actually revealing to me that this is the health of a democracy where we're able to freely engage as long as our engagements have in mind the benefit or have in mind that the South African people need to be benefited from whatever we do, that whatever we do shouldn't be benefiting to ourselves. But if our engagements keep the South African people and what's best for them in mind, then it's perfect. Then that's a healthy democracy functioning right there. So that's what I mean. My low moment actually turned into quite a high moment for me. Yeah.
So, what are your plans for the rest of this year and beyond?
Yeah. So this year I began my master's degree. It's
Wow.
in yeah, it's in data sciences, but rather applied data science for the social sciences and humanities. And so dedicating this year to basically look into research. I'm still yet to decide where my research is gonna go. I kind of have a bit of an idea, but I'm still yet to see. Probably it's gonna go in developmental issues in South Africa. But yeah, I'm really dedicating this year and probably even next year to the completion of my master's degree. However, the political journey doesn't stop, and
Mm.
so I'm really as I said, my political journey really only in constitutional advocacy really only began last year. And so I'm looking to really accelerate that this year, to do more in constitutional advocacy. I also have a twin brother who is in the same space. We both did, where every time people ask me, oh, what degree did he did? I'm like, well, our whole undergrad, we sat side by side in the same classroom doing the exact same degree. So he's also in the
Wow.
political space, and
Oh.
he created an initiative called Eco Youth. And it's basically an initiative on youth empowerment, but not just youth empowerment. You see, his idea behind creating it was that, many times we only limit everything to youth empowerment, but we don't have actionable steps to empower youth. And so this year, I also think I will be working with him to develop that work. And so I think it's going to be a very fruitful year ahead with the constitutional advocacy, focusing on youth empowerment, and mechanisms we can put in place at Eco Youth to really get the youth to experience the tangible effects of that promised life the Constitution has for them. So this is my forecast for the year to come.
Okay, finally, what are your words of inspiration for people that may want to enter the spaces that you're in?
Yeah. So I think with the space when I entered the space, I had to ask myself, what is it that I believe in? Now,
Mm.
Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of the United States, said something very interesting. He says, if you don't know what you stand for, you'll fall for anything. Siddharth, I think one of the biggest mistakes we can make is to try enter a space like this not knowing what it is that we stand for. It's a question you really have to answer yourself. What are your beliefs? What do you believe the future of South Africa should look like? I also really strongly um, believe that we should stop seeing politics as a sort of place where we can have a quick rise to fame or a quick rise to financial wealth. I'm very opposed to that sort of view, and I think that really destroys the meaning behind politics. And I
Mm.
would really caution youth to not have that look when you want to enter into the field. But when you enter into the field, it's something where we can't contribute to the lines that have already been drawn. We have to think differently. Utopian thinking, we have to redraw the lines. If we see that the lines that have been drawn in South African politics is not fruitful, then it's up to us to think differently and redraw those lines. And so my plea to youth, especially that want to enter the political space, is to really, really invoke this utopian thinking. So that everything that surrounds us today is a result of utopian thinking. I mean, imagine if years ago, because I studied international relations, I always say, well, years ago, I wonder if people would ever think there could be an institution like the United Nations, a multilateral institution that unites, that brings together the whole world in one table. The cell phones that we each using, the computers that we each using, these are results of utopian thinking. And so many people will diffuse or utopian thinking, saying that it's just something that can't come into fruition. It's just a figment of this imagination. But that's what I'm saying. I mean, if we never had utopian thinking, we wouldn't have many of the things that we have today. We wouldn't have an aircraft that we could fly to the other side of the world, a car we could drive around. So my plea is, let's have this utopian form of thinking. Let's think differently about things. We always have to, don't think according, as I said, don't think according to the lines. Don't try and say, find a place to be in what's already existing. No. Think differently, try and bring something new. The country needs newness. The country doesn't need what's already been established. The country needs a newness. Of course, everything must be done with the Constitution in mind. The Constitution really protects each and every single one of us, and we need to respect it. So that's just words I can impart from my beginning journey in politics. So yeah.
All I gotta say is thanks so much for your time, and hope to catch up with you again in the future.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and I'm really looking forward to be back in the future for more chats.
Thanks, man.